Hello and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connery, which with me as always is Phil McKenzie. Phil.
Oh.
Why is the first word of the show you say always just half a word?
Again, I like keeping people on their toes.
Can we get
You don't know what's up, or whether I said sup.
Yeah, that's true.
It could. You just don't know whether it's going to be my mic cutting out, my internet failing me, whether I'm just choosing brevity that day.
You might have said giddy up, for all I know. I think to keep us all in suspense, you should just say up from now on at the start of the show. Just save yourself.
Just try and say one unintelligible syllable that could be anything.
Okay, that's going to be the new bit going forward. Great. I can't wait. Could somebody get this oi bruv a new goddamn mic? All right. Welcome to Heavy Hands. We have fight night cards. 2 of them. I gotta be honest, the one coming up next week I kind of thought was better than it looks to me now. But the main event
it was better.
Did it lose some fights?
No, they moved Song Yadong versus Ricky Simone to the following week.
That was the one. I knew.
Huge change.
I knew there was a good fight on there. That would have made a huge difference.
To be fair, it's now the main event of the following week, so at least we get 5 rounds out of it.
A deserved bantamweight main event. Yes.
Yeah, but what you would have liked to have seen is obviously this just being the main event in the first place.
Yeah.
Not having to get through a potential 5 rounds of heavyweight action.
Well, they got heavyweights, so you know what happens. It is, of course, Sergey Pavlovich, a man whose fights are very instructive. We really understand his strengths and his weaknesses, based on what we've seen in the cage. And he's fighting Curtis Blaydes, about whom I would say those things and not be lying. That's about it, I think, for what we're going to cover. We're going to get to that in segment 2. Otherwise, we are going to focus our attention on the card from last weekend, which, of course, was main evented by Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen. And this card looked fantastic on paper for a fight night card. And I think it played out that way. We had a lot of interesting fights. Barboza recapturing the Beneil Dariush knockout down at featherweight, the insane counter knee off the back foot against Billy Quarantillo. This guy, Azamat Mirzakhanov, actually rocks. Somebody on Twitter called him funnier Kelvin Gastelum. I think you could also call him doughier Yoel Romero. I think he's a much more interesting fighter than I supposed before this fantastic showing against Dustin Jacoby. Iwan Kudalaba is back, Phil. Hulk is back. There was a lot of stuff here. Munoz, Gutierrez, Rafa Garcia had the performance of his career against the corpse of Clay Guida. I mean, yeah, there was a whole lot to like on this card. So we are going to, of course, touch on the main event. We're going to get back to the undercard in segment 3. And there is a significant chance, though I won't make any promises as of yet, that we touch on even more of this undercard in a bonus episode, because there is an awful lot to cover. I mean, how could we forgive ourselves, Phil, if we didn't make time for Zach Cummings versus Ed Herman?
Surprisingly cool fight.
Yeah, and really stupid. I mean, it was, It looked like a fight from 2001. Which was kind of the case. All right, let's talk about the main event with no further ado. Max Holloway, Arnold Allen. I know you have an opinion on this to start with, Phil, so why don't you ask me or the listeners the same question you asked before?
Yeah, I mean, I just found myself wondering, like, is this the fight where Max Holloway is no longer a force of nature?
That's kind of how it felt.
This is really the one where it felt like this was a crafty, clever performance from him rather than a dominating performance.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's good and bad things. I mean, I said before, I said last week that this was one of those ones where I had mixed feelings about the fight because, I've seen watching Arnold Allen since he was back on the regional scene in Cage Warriors. I think I've seen him live. And, that you always have, it's like seeing bands on the way up, always have a soft spot for people like that. But on the other hand, it's Max Holloway as well. So I didn't really know how to feel about this one. And the aftermath, I'm not really sure how to feel either.
I saw Arnold Allen in a Buffalo Wild Wings with like 4 other people. Yeah. I ate so many boneless wings.
Who wouldn't? Because this is one where it was like a good fight. But it also was one where I didn't feel like either guy necessarily had the best performance.
Yeah, it felt like they canceled each other out a bit. I would agree with that.
Yeah. I thought that, Holloway did a good job. As we were talking about before the show, he has had sort of slightly slower paced fights like this before, namely his fight against Frankie Edgar, and also to some extent his fight against Anthony Pettis.
Mm-hmm.
It did feel like a fight where his margins for winning the round weren't necessarily that clear. I'm not saying like there was any kind of
he definitely clearly
over
won
the decision, but
yeah, he definitely had and held on to the advantage from about round 3 afterwards. But yeah, it was for Max it was like those older fights, and a lot like I think he's sort of been toying with and trying to develop this style since the second Volkanovski fight.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Where I think we saw in that one, he tried to do a lot of different things. He tried a lot more counterfighting, much less insistence on pressuring and throwing combinations. And I think we saw some of the effects of that in that fight, that being a new approach for him, in that it was the first fight I had ever seen in which Max Holloway did not get better as the fight went on. He came in with a bunch of new ideas, and then Volkanovski adjusted to them, and then he was kind of at sea and couldn't build the way he pretty much always had, even in those slower performances, like the one against Anthony Pettis. He couldn't build to anything. I think he has been trying to deepen this side of his game. He looked more defensively responsible, certainly. Much more committed to exiting on angles and forcing Arnold Allen to reset again and again. This was like a southpaw jab clinic from Max Holloway, which is certainly a dynamic I did not expect. Even though he's been switching stance a ton lately, even more than he used to. Maybe we should have guessed, but for all that we talked about how he's done against UFC southpaws, it was in fact a question of how does Arnold Allen deal with a southpaw? And the answer was not all that well. So yeah, I thought it was in some ways it didn't look like a performance that bespeaks like a long and bright future for Max Holloway returning to the championship, but it did look like an interesting like realization of a direction he's been trying to head in for a while. I thought he pulled it off pretty well. This is just a different kind of 5-round performance from Max Holloway. And for Arnold Allen, yeah, this was also much more in line with basically all the fights Arnold Allen used to have before he stepped up and started crushing people either directly or indirectly. He was in a lot of close.
This is the other thing is that this was an uncommonly clear. It was clear, most of the rounds were clear, but closer than usual. Let's say for Max, he wasn't putting his stamp on them in the way that he might before. But yeah, this was one that also reminds you that Arnold Allen does not traditionally win rounds by a wide margin at all.
No.
And yeah, you could see why. Getting dialed into just basically coming in with entries and throwing single left hands.
Yeah.
A lot of the his timing and his entries improved in round 2, but then I think Max adjusted to that and kind of took it away a little bit. But yeah, a lot of it was just like coming in with the left hand or big left high kick double threat.
Mm-hmm.
And just found yourself thinking, cannot be expecting this to work over 5 rounds against Max Holloway.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, even more recently, he has had a performance like this. His fight with Sadiq Youssef, for example.
Yeah, that was the one that, like, afterwards we were like, hey, he won that, and that was good.
Yeah, he won it without question.
One of those sort of slightly Chito Vera-esque performances where he was getting out-volumed and then got single knockdowns to, like, seal rounds.
Yeah. And it was very surprising at the time. We're like, how is it that we expected Arnold Allen to be putting the pace on Youssef and Youssef delivering the power, and the dynamic was exactly the opposite. Yeah, and this looked a bit like that. I think part of it was, I have to assume that Allen probably would have been more competitive if he got a more predictable Max Holloway. Like, he would have gotten busted up and been in some crazy exchanges, but it looked to me like he probably expected Max to give him more opportunities to land counters. Like, again, all our talk about the Poirier fight was largely irrelevant because Max didn't approach Allen the way he approached Poirier at all. And so Allen was basically just stuck in a range, like, boxing match at long range where it came down to basically like whose footwork is better, whose feints are better. This was an especially high feint output from Max Holloway. I actually found that pretty impressive. He's, for all of his creativity and effectiveness as a boxer and a striker, he hasn't always been a big feinter. Not compared to somebody like Robert Whittaker. He's been someone who puts stuff out there to draw a reaction out of you and then extends the combination, which is why there's so many great highlights of Max throwing like 10 punches in a goddamn row. But he was doing a lot of controlling with his feints in this fight and really just confusing Allen's reactions. I think for me, the major roadblock for Arnold Allen against this style was purely mechanical. And I think it's that, it's something I've pointed out before with him. He hangs his head out in front of his entire body. He's extremely heavy on his front foot. And he uses that, that shield guard that Firas Zahabi appears to advocate for every single one of his fighters. And he uses his speed, but because of this, he was stuck in a difficult position because ideally, if you're trying to close somebody down, what you want to do is get right on the cusp of range, even step into range fully before you let your strikes go. And Allen ran into a problem because the moment he was getting onto the edge of range for his own strikes, his face was right there to be hit. This is what happens when your head floats over your front foot. You can't get your feet into range first. And so he got put in this difficult position where he either had to step in and just get hit, and there were an awful lot of instances of Holloway just intercepting him easily with the jab, the southpaw jab mostly, or he had to fly in from really far away and count on his speed. And that worked sometimes, but Max adjusted to that, and it's not a very reproducible tactic. I mean, there's a reason why the correct way to do things is to get close before you throw. And I actually thought, I was pretty impressed with how Max sort of managed the distance and prevented Allen from setting up in an effective range as the fight wore on. But I think,
I thought it was interesting from a traditional perspective. Like, Max basically was punching Allen's easily available head.
Yep. And
they were in the close stance, and Max was standing southpaw. And then he was just doing a lot of body work when they were in open stance.
Yep, huge body kicks.
Makes sense. Yeah, big body kicks. He was throwing that long lead right to the body just the long right to the body that I mentioned that he does actually like to throw against southpaws.
He threw it as a lead right a lot, yeah. Lead as in the first punch of the attack, not lead.
Yes, as in the first punch, not his front hand. But,
yeah.
I mean, I think the difference is that when Allen was knew in the fifth round that he had to go for it because he was at best 3-1 down. Then you saw suddenly that he could actually make a lot more work.
Yeah.
Once he was coming in behind combinations, and that was kind of one of the things that I was looking to see out of this fight was that Allen had been doing a lot more combination work against Hooker and Keita.
Yeah.
I was kind of expecting that was going to be what he would. That's how he makes up the Poirier difference, is that he makes it up with, he doesn't have the power, but he has the hand speed to be able to throw in combination.
Yep.
And, in that round, you saw that probably, that does kind of work. Max is more defensively responsible, but still mostly in a kind of getting out of the way kind of way. And once Allen started following it up with punch, once he started following up his entries with more punches, he was catching Max moving backwards in much the same way that Dustin did.
Yep.
You also saw the risks of it because Allen pretty much got face planted right at the end of the round.
Yeah. We had a disappointing spate of wrestling. And then suddenly the last 10 seconds of Holloway, Ricardo Lamas broke out. And in that, I'm pretty sure it was a brutally short, crushing elbow that Max ran Allen into. Just flash knockdown right at the end of the fight. Still a good round for Allen, and you're absolutely right that but that's why I suppose that he was not prepared for this approach. He thought he was going to get a more of a dogfight out of Max. It took him until he was in a desperate situation to just go out there and put his strikes together. I also think it's an open question if he could have done that for 5 rounds.
Yes, that is for sure. I'm unconvinced.
Yeah.
But I think that still would have been his best chance of winning. I think you're going to, unless you are Alexander Volkanovski, you are going to have to go through hell to beat Max Holloway.
Yeah.
He did it seemed to be thinking that he could do it by finding the perfect entry.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. So, I'm glad at this one at least. I had the feeling about Israel Adesanya, and I didn't go with it. And I had a sort of feeling about this, I think more based on just how, where Max is at. But I'm glad I didn't pull the trigger on that suspicion. It felt more vague, and as a lot of Allen's results in the cage have felt kind of vague. I just didn't really see what is the precise path to victory for Allen, and apparently Allen didn't either. So
yeah, I mean, Holloway turns another contender back. I don't know, it's a struggle to see where he really goes from here.
Yeah.
Does he just, as Volkanovski's already come out in an interview where he's like, stop taking out all my contenders.
I think, why wouldn't Max just go to lightweight and just see what happens? I don't know. I think as long as Volkanovski is champ, his prospects at winning the title back at 145 are kind of dead. I don't even know what it would possibly, the run he would have to go on to even get a 4th fight after how dominant the 3rd one was, and the fact that he's lost the series up to now, would be like the run he had to go on to get to the title in the first place. I don't think he can do that again. He can't, there's no way. There aren't even 10 dudes that he can crush, to put on that kind of streak. He's already beaten them all, except Volk. So, yeah, I mean,
and they just, at this point, they just will not risk the exciting contenders on Max Holloway.
No, why would they?
They didn't do it with Yair Rodriguez. I
Yeah.
mean, they did, but, lost that, and they were like, well, have a title shot anyway.
Yeah, Max is at the moment
do
cursed.
I think Ilya Topuria is going to have to go through Max Holloway? I do not.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would see it, but the chances of Max, figuring something out just seem too great. Max it feels cursed right now as a promotional prospect by the fact that he's just clearly the second best dude in the division, so clearly.
Yeah, I mean, I think, he can be like, well, Israel Adesanya lost 3 fights to Alex Pereira and then finally got his win at the end. But, realistically, he never had a fight with Pereira that looked anything like as one-sided as Max Volk 3.
No. Yeah, Max was on the wrong side of one of Volkanovski's most impressive performances.
Yeah, I think his sole chance of getting that belt back is essentially Volk aging out, because Volk is still 4 years older than him.
Yeah.
But given that they are, given how much Max has been in these wars, and I mean, even this, a relatively controlled performance, he got hit a ton.
Sure.
And hard.
Yeah, he always gets hit super clean.
Yeah, there is no guarantee that Volk ages out slower than Max Holloway does.
Yeah.
I mean, faster even.
I would actually guess that Max will age out first. We'll see. We will see. A good and interesting performance from Max Holloway. I don't know. What does Arnold Allen do from here? I mean, what do you want to see out of him that was different from this performance? What can he take to learn? What can he learn to pit himself against other opponents?
I mean, he just has to be able to be aggressive against fighters that he doesn't immediately feel like he's 3 times faster than. Yeah. That does seem to be like the signature problem with him. I think, as you said, it's a mechanical problem. Like, it's that he gets in trouble if that's the case.
Yeah, I think the technical thing is a real shortcoming, because he's basically in a position where he needs to make it sustainable is to be able to pressure without having to throw at a Max Holloway kind of pace. And the only way he can do that is to get in there and keep in a pressuring range, force people backwards with footwork and with his presence, and not get hit the whole time he's doing that. And at the moment, his defense is almost entirely occupying both hands to block a shot, making it harder to counter, or getting back out of range, making it harder to pressure. So yeah, I do think there is a serious, that's the kind of thing, it's possible, but I don't see that changing. This is the way he has fought his entire career, as far as I know.
Yeah. I mean, I think at this point, he's now been pushed back for basically the first time in his UFC career. I think it is, and to start taking serious risks that, he's going to have to replicate that 5th round more, basically.
Yeah.
I don't think there's many contenders in the featherweight division that he can have slow, that he can have slow fights where he can win them off a single knockdown, or where he can replicate that Sadiq Yusuf thing, or where he can attempt to have these kind of margins. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. It is actually rare these days, I feel, that what is holding a fighter back is like a very specific technical shortcoming, not like some broader strategic thing, but that really does feel like the case to me with Arnold Allen. We will see what he does from here.
I'm just thinking about it, like Josh Emmett, Brian Ortega, these are, I think, winnable matchups, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
Ones which, again, will force him to be genuinely proactive.
Yeah. And it's not impossible that Brian Ortega can, at least at points, replicate a bit of what he did to, like, Korean Zombie. It's a much faster opponent, but a lot of the same ideas will be there. And with Josh Emmett, it feels like the Sadiq Yusuf dynamic might be reversed. That Allen could do a lot of good work and just get his head blown off with a single shot and lose a round or the fight in one moment. So we'll see. I'm if anything more interested in Arnold Allen, but there are questions that remain unanswered, and I don't feel like the questions answered in this fight were the ones that he was hoping to ask. So let's take a break. When we come back, we are going to look ahead to the main event of next week's Fight Night card. That is Sergey Pavlovich versus Curtis Blaydes. After that, coming back to the Holloway Allen undercard for Barboza, Quarantillo, Hulk Smash, I Am Very Brutal, Munoz, Gutierrez, and more after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Well, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We're talking about the big boys. And if I sound excited, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Sergey Pavlovich, Curtis Blaydes. Now all the usual grousing set aside, I will say I find any Curtis Blaydes fight more interesting than the average heavyweight fight, because Curtis Blaydes does things that are very interesting for a heavyweight to do. Namely, he wrestles. He wrestles and he tries to be like a patient, moderate output range striker. And these two things don't necessarily fit together that well, but he's taking a slow road to improvement, and he wrestles. So this is better than the vast majority, I would say, of heavyweight main events for me. Because at least it feels like a style clash and not just like, oh, this one guy punches really hard and this other guy sucks a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the rare heavyweight main event where one of the guys isn't super old.
That's
just
true.
Like, you are here because you have built up some kind of cachet in the UFC, and it's clearly, any vestiges of athleticism and so on have long since faded, but we're going to see if you can win just by, pure, durability and due to the fact that, your opponent is probably really bad.
Yeah. Usually,
these guys are both pretty much in their prime.
Yeah, and usually the opponent being pretty bad is some kind of factor in heavyweight fights. It's very difficult to scrape together a matchup with two good heavyweights. It's not entirely clear that this is one of those matchups. Sergey Pavlovich, a classic heavyweight prospect, in that his wins are so instantaneous and violent that we still know next to nothing about him. And his longer wins are unimpressive or uninteresting enough that it's difficult to say that he was tested and exposed or whatever. It's a very heavyweight kind of arc. But yeah, we have two guys more or less in their athletic primes, and it is a matchup where certainly Sergey Pavlovich could do the thing he's been doing to everyone, but that'll pretty much always be the case. It's heavyweight. But this looks like a serious test, likes of which he has not had at all in the UFC, unless you consider the fact that the greatest wrestler he's fought so far was Alistair Overeem, who crushed him on the ground. So, how predictive is that of how this fight plays out?
So it's just a Derek Lewis fight, isn't it, for Curtis Blaydes?
Yeah.
This guy isn't very good. Not really very good anywhere. He does hit really hard. And in that way, obviously really want Curtis Blaydes to win.
Yeah.
Because he deserves to.
I mean, that's how I feel.
That's
how I feel.
Yeah, that's how I felt in the Derek Lewis fight as well. It's that like one of these guys has a chance and it's landing one huge bomb that instantly ends the fight, and the other one is simply just much better at fighting than he is. Sergey Pavlovich. He is someone who's as we've said, he strikes like Alexei Oleinik, but he has incredible power and he's not, 1,000 years old.
Yeah, he's much faster.
He's
accurate.
Yeah, that's his main trick, really. Like Derek Lewis's was that he was surprisingly fast and agile.
Yeah,
so that he could suddenly, rush out and shock people or kick them in the head or whatever. Pavlovich's one trick is that he is accurate. He throws horrendous looping punches, but he actually has a reasonably good idea of where they're going.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, unlike Lewis, he's this one UFC moment of being in grappling exchanges. Derek Lewis is no one's idea of a good grappler, but he didn't actually tend to get knocked out on bottom a lot.
No.
Pavlovich got crushed in a round. I mean, more than the actual, in some ways, more so than his technique from the bottom was the way that he already looked exhausted at the end of one round. He has fought 5-rounders or a 5-rounder in Fight Nights Global.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a tepid-paced kickboxing, pot-shotting kickboxing match for the entirety of it against Mikhail Mokhnatkin. And other than that, he's really primarily just been crushing people in a round.
Yeah. It has one takedown at the end. You'd be remiss not to point out.
Yes.
That people have brought these things up many times. You're like, man, Sergey Pavlovich, did you know this guy can wrestle? Which he can offensively. He can hit some pretty cool dynamic clinch stuff if you're like, you smash into him completely out of position and he's much stronger than you. I've yet to see any evidence that he can wrestle at the level of Curtis Blaydes, and defensively, he appears not much better than your average heavyweight.
Yeah. I mean, he gets that takedown on Mokhnatkin and then almost gets pretty close to getting swept, but then Mokhnatkin just stands up. That's the end of it. And, that we're talking the end of a 25-minute heavyweight fight.
Yeah.
No one should be able to stand up from a takedown at the end of a 25-minute heavyweight fight.
Yeah.
You both should be too knackered. I'm not sold on his wrestling in any way. It's just one of those ones where you pretty much have to pick Curtis Blaydes to finish him from top position over 25 minutes.
Right.
I mean, if he doesn't, it will be a Rob Font-esque tragedy, frankly.
Yeah.
On the one hand, Pavlovich it's funny in a kind of stupid, memey, so bad, but also is winning fights anyway kind of way. But the problem is the thing that we mentioned at the beginning of this segment, which is that people like that will wear out their welcome long after, the funniness has faded. Like, this, streak of one-round KOs, Pavlovich is going to be a main card and probably main event staple for years to come.
That's true.
He's 30. We're potentially going to be watching this guy for, another 10 years plus.
How much better can he get?
He won't.
What do you mean? No, that heavyweights always get better. There's so much room to grow, Phil, that they can't possibly just stay the same, right? There's so much better to get.
The one thing you can basically know how it's going to go. He's just going to get more inactive, and he'll clinch more. That's how they change over time.
Yeah.
You should want Curtis Blaydes to crush him because will reduce the already increasing chance that we're going to be seeing him in main events forever. I mean, Jairzinho Rosenstrike still gets tons of main events and main card spots, and he is just awful.
He's one of the most dreadfully boring fighters in the entire sport. He is worse than Valentina Shevchenko has ever been. Valentina Shevchenko is clearly winning when she's being boring. Rosenstrike is frequently just not doing anything. And yeah, he still gets highlight bookings.
Please, Curtis, please, just... No, I find Pavlovich funny, and the idea of Lexi Oleinik but just the striking, that being successful, is funny to me.
Yeah.
Can also see into the future, and I know how thin that joke's going to wear out. Like, just stop the memes, Curtis. Stop them now. Finish him brutally.
Yeah, I don't need that joke. I've heard this one before, you know? I like seeing Curtis Blaydes beat people at heavyweight in a way that heavyweights are not used to. Yeah, I don't even know what else to glean. Again, this is the problem with fighters like Pavlovich, is that there's just not a lot of data to work with. Like, is it worth saying that, like, Overeem got him down striking into a double collar tie and then foot swept him when he thought he was striking or whatever? I mean, Curtis Blaydes is like a double guy. That's like his best takedown. I don't think any of this matters that much. Blaydes can hit takedowns from anywhere. He has hit some dazzling, lifts and throws and slams from clinches. He can easily find the same underhook and wrist control, pin against the fence that Overeem worked Pavlovich with. He knocked Overeem himself out with virtually the same elbows and hammer fists that Overeem knocked Pavlovich out with. So yeah, please, Curtis. I guess the only thing that the only concern here is, that he has been striking a lot lately, including in that fight with Derek Lewis. Ironically, that's a fight where he probably would have just kept winning if he'd kept striking. It was the level change that killed him. Who knows? Very likely Pavlovich will have spent time in this camp preparing to uppercut or knee somebody who level changes on him. But I really don't think this is one. I think Pavlovich is better than Derek Lewis. Like, he's faster, certainly much faster on his feet. He is a better combination puncher, which is not a high bar to clear, but he certainly clears it. He's more accurate. He's more precise with his punches. I do not think this would be the best opportunity to spend an inordinate amount of time striking. I mean, a little bit is obviously going to be necessary. Blaydes should use his jab, force Pavlovich to chase him, but he needs to take him off his feet early in the fight and start taxing him and beating him up. If he doesn't do that, I think he very likely ends up in trouble. If he does, I got to assume he wins.
So, as I said, it will be a tragedy
if
Blaydes managed to lose the meme KO again.
Yep.
No. Happened to him against Ganu, which is understandable, and Lewis, which kind of isn't. And this would be to just be bleak.
Yep, might happen. It's already happened before.
And hopefully, Blaydes is still friends with Overeem. Overeem can just be like, yeah, fought this guy. He's very good at grappling, so I did it to him. You should do that.
That would be good. Some much-needed advice that somehow Curtis Blaydes might not come to of his own volition. It seems patently obvious. All right, well, that's heavyweight MMA for you, folks. Again, this is an interesting fight. I'm very curious to see it play out. It's just difficult to know what to say about these matchups. The dynamics are so straightforward, and there is not even a good kind of mystery around one of the fighters. This isn't even like Arnold Allen. Like, ooh, what's he really capable of? Like, I know what Pavlovich is capable of. I'm just waiting to see somebody shoot it full of holes. But But yeah, I will be happy to see Curtis Blaydes do some wrestling. It's a cool thing. We don't see enough of it heavyweight. That's that. Let's take one more break. When we come back, Holloway, Allen, the other fights after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are now talking about featherweights. Edson Barboza versus Billy Quarantillo. We had one of our rare sort of disagreements about this fight. Does any of that reflect on what happened as it played out?
Not really.
Yeah. It was mostly a very pedantic argument about the slight distinctions between Billy Quarantillo and Shane Burgos.
Yeah. Instead, it was one of those ones where, like, oh yeah, sometimes Edson Barboza can just wipe people out.
Yeah. Well, I did kind of say he was going to do that, didn't I?
I mean, we both agreed that he was probably going to crap out of Billy Quarantillo, but yeah.
Deliver some, one way or the other, some kind of damage early that disallows Quarantillo from building as he usually does. I suppose Quarantillo had something of the right approach. He was like, I'm going to be hittable early. I'm going to do what like Dariush did. I'm just going to stall him out. Just put him against the cage as quickly as I can. And just try to wrestle him and wear on him. And, not even ironically, the exact same thing that happened to Beneil Dariush happened to Billy Quarantillo, only much faster. Less than 3 minutes into the fight, in fact.
Yeah, I mean, I was glad to see this. I really like Edson Barboza.
Me too.
I'm really glad he's not super shot.
Who doesn't like Edson Barboza?
There was one part where I was a little worried where he did the sort of little river dancing gallop to get away from something, and there was that little hitch in the step that means that he's just that little bit wobbly from getting hurt by something. I was like, oh no. No, it was okay. And then, yes, he landed one of the awesome counter knees of the night.
That's true. Yeah, there were more than one of just that kind. I didn't catch that little moment where he got buzzed.
It's just one of those things where you know when Edson's like galloping sideways.
Yeah.
It's just like a little wobblier than it needs to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm always like now worried that the turning point is going to come for him. But yeah, this will hopefully get him a good fight from Max Holloway.
Oh God, they might do that now that you mention it. Oh, they often do that too with fighters who fight on the same card on the same night and then get booked against each other.
Yes, I don't want to see him fight Max Holloway. I would like to see him fight people that he can beat. If one of those people where I would, it's one of the ones where I would genuinely want just an improbable late career run. If you could ask me, it's a fighter that makes no sense to go on like a real late career run that you would still like to see do it. Edson Barboza would be close to the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
Seems super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad he's not shot.
Yeah. He's one of those freak athletes who just appears to have a super long tail in his prime because he's just physically such a specimen.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the few fighters that makes the extremely heterosexual UFC commentary team like horny for his male body. They couldn't stop talking about it. They're like, oh my God, Edson is so shredded.
It's so shredded.
I'd love to see just a thin sheen of mineral oil on that Daniel, are you all right? He hit the single. Yeah, I'm single. Anyway, yeah, it was good to see. There's not a whole lot to say about it because, Quarantillo was in the early stages of a game plan that looked like a good idea, and Edson, I think, just perfectly read a pattern that had already presented itself. Clearly, this was one of those fights where Quarantillo wanted to press him into the cage and wrestle him, try to do his version of an approach that has worked many times against Edson, and even getting hit, like in the exchange preceding the level change, Barboza very clearly read the intention of those first two shots and timed an absolutely picture-perfect knee off the back foot. All right. What else happened on this prelim card or this undercard? That's right. The light heavyweight guy. Did you have any opinion whatsoever about Azamat Murzakanov before this, Phil?
Not really. He just seemed to be like vaguely Sergei Pavlovich-esque light heavyweight puncher.
Yeah. I actually found this to be a pretty comprehensively good performance from him.
He's got like a genuinely functional southpaw boxing game.
Yeah. He's got a jab. He hits the body a ton. His
check hook.
Yeah, his counter punches are solid. His shot selection in general. And a lot of good use with sort of like the rhythmic feinting game as well. Dustin Jacoby is first of all, a very durable fighter. He has not been knocked out in a very long time. And certainly by light heavyweight standards, an extremely technical kickboxer. And I just think Murzakanov, he had a speed advantage early, and he did all the right things to just constantly keep Jacoby from getting any momentum at all. He kept him backing up. He kept him reacting to a huge variety of feints. He used his jab to spear him on the way in. And then every time Jacoby would try to set his feet and get some momentum going of any kind, Murzakanov would throw a short combination where whatever the shot was that came after the jab or the feint was very unpredictable. A lot of huge left hands to the body, a lot of huge overhands, a few perfectly straight left hands, some really sneaky left uppercuts were a shot that worked for him frequently. Also played the right hook off the jab. I thought it was a pretty classy, clever performance from a guy. This is, as I said, somebody on Twitter already made the Kelvin Gastelum comparison. This was a much deeper idea of how to use a thick little speedy frame and a lot of power than Kelvin Gastelum has ever had.
Well, I wouldn't say much deeper, but it is
it doesn't have to.
Especially for the standards of the division that he's in.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looked pretty good. Faded out of the fight absolutely horrifically in the third round, but I think I heard that his arm was broken?
He said that. I wondered if it was a mistranslation and it was actually his hand.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows? Fighters always say something is broken, but something could have gone wrong. Broke his left hand, hurt his left shoulder, who knows?
Yeah, also, though, when people fade horrifically out of fights, it's generally a good idea to just be going to take that as a data point. I'm not going to get taken away from me, like Till versus Dalby.
That is exactly what I was going to mention, yeah.
You're sure, yeah, your shoulder's out, but so you look like you would gas out.
No, he was, whatever other issues might have been going on, it is self-evident that he was gassed. He's not the most efficient fighter, he as clever as his game is, it is really, really dependent on him being super quick and being able to cover distance before his opponent can react.
Dustin Jacoby, meanwhile, seems to be first to be a guy who would have probably a really good record if he was fighting 5 rounders.
Absolutely. He's a dog, man.
He's the big guy. He's the one big guy who just can't it quite up to that point where he can get them.
Yeah. 205 Will Brooks. I love Jacoby, man. He's a very technical fighter. I think he's clearly got like some confidence issues that prevent him from getting into a flow early against many opponents. I mean, Iwan Kutalaba got a 10-8 round against him in their fight, just by being Iwan Kutalaba. But he always gets better as the fight goes on, and at a certain point, he just sort of stops caring about getting hit clean and decides he's just going to knuckle down and stand his ground and trade and build layers on his combinations. And he absolutely would have won this fight if there was even half of one more round, right? He was cruising by the end.
There's the Kutalaba fight. That 10-8 round was at the beginning.
Yeah.
Then, Jacoby clearly won the next 2 rounds. Yeah, he's cursed to not. One of those fighters who's obviously built for 5 rounds and is cursed to never get them because he's going to run into roadblocks like this.
Yeah, but it made for an unusually interesting light heavyweight fight, I gotta say. Speaking of light heavyweights and the Hulk himself, Iwan Kutalaba is back.
He's back.
Where's this rank on the Iwan Kutalaba hilarity scale? It wasn't the funniest Iwan Kutalaba fight.
No, but it was still funny. And you know what? Being him so happy, he's almost certainly just a terrible person. Honestly, he's given me so much entertainment over the years.
Yeah.
It did give me some joy to see him, so happy after winning that. I was like, you're probably a dreadful person in real life, but
I would love to find out.
Given me many laughs.
I'd love to find out that he's not. That he's just a very sweet man with a very short temper.
No, he's not.
Don't even tell me. If you know of any stories, tell me after. I don't know.
I'm not telling you. I don't know any. I don't want to ruin it for myself.
Yeah. I also.
Yeah, there was Well, there was the point afterwards, after he'd knocked Boza out, where it was he was running around.
Whoa!
It was before he could really get into his full screaming anger mode. He's just walking around after he finished him, and he was nodding to himself yes, yes. Now is the time to get hyped up. Now is the time to scream. And you could see he had to remind himself a little bit. Has to
It's been a while, man.
Exactly.
It's been a while since he's done anything except any kind of roar that isn't the last gasp of a dying man. He has been getting absolutely pasted for a while now. So
it reminds you that every now and again he does this. He finds a fairly decent-ish heavyweight and just absolutely blows their doors off.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think that Tanner Boser looked particularly bad as a light heavyweight.
I mean, it's just
he just,
as I said, Slobber just does this every now and again.
Yeah, he just catches you sort of lazily skittering backwards on a straight line and just runs you over.
We'll say, I mean, this was just classic Slobber. And, we were worried that, he's getting a bit more and technical and so on. This was just him doing what he does and just bum rushing someone.
Oh, yeah. And the finishing sequence was classic. We talk all the time about how MMA fighters need to be more considered, more precise with their finishing shots on the ground. Not Iwan. Whizzer, the guy struggling to get up, just throw 900 short punches off the same hand as hard as you can. Finish in such a way that you would lose an arm wrestling match to a child if you had to go 3 more minutes after this. And then he did bring a lot of the joy and hilarity in the post-fight interview. I think my favorite, there was all the wahing, all the roaring and whatnot. He just kept interrupting himself to just bellow at the crowd. But I think my favorite moment was when Cormier was trying to get him to talk through the replay. because Cormier had picked up. I gotta give some credit to DC. He is trying, man. Like all these distracting motherfuckers in the booth taking advantage of his gregariousness. I think DC is really trying to like break down the fights and understand what's happening for the viewers. I do think he is the one who takes the analyst thing most seriously. And also clearly like reads analysis stuff, or at least sees it on Twitter, because he has definitely mentioned things that like people in our circle have pointed out. Anyway, he tried to have that moment with Cutelaba, and he was like, so you threw these looping right hands, and then you caught him with this perfectly straight one that went right past his defenses. Was that something you prepared for in the camp? And Iwan Cutelaba said, I am brutal. I am very brutal. Completely does not answer. Actually, it does answer the question. No, DC. No, he did not prepare for that in camp.
He said that he'd learned everything about Barboza.
Well, what does that mean, do you think, from Iwan Cutelaba?
I just like to think that he's got like a blackboard.
Yeah.
And like he just builds out these, he builds out like a psychological and technical profile of his, for like his opponent. And writes it all down on the board, and it's just got like a big arrow, and then it points to like the game plan section, and it just says Hulk smash.
Yeah, brilliant preparation by Iwan Cutelaba. Really paid off.
Never change Iwan.
No, and I don't think he will. I don't think he can.
Yeah.
All right. How about we cover one more as part of this main episode? Which one should we touch on here? I mean, Munoz Gutierrez was a gatekeeper shutting the door. I don't know how fascinating the fight itself was. Do you want to hit that, or do you want to talk about something that was more exciting?
Am I alone in thinking that I haven't really looked at other people's takes on this? I had to go to a birthday party that someone did where we had to go cycling around the velodrome, like the
hell is that
thing they used for the Olympics. It was very tiring. So basically I came home after that and then just fell asleep in front of the UFC. So some of my analysis may not have been at its sharpest. Just kind of thought Chris Gutierrez won this.
Oh, really? Alone? I mean, I thought he definitely got himself very much into the fight after round one. I didn't actually think he did enough to win.
Just didn't think Munoz was landing anything after the first round, really.
I mean, I don't think you're wrong about that either. Let me look up the MMA decisions real quick, see if anyone else out there agrees with you. Let's see.
Yeah,
media
seems
scores.
Like a weird one. Like the booth was talking about it, and they were just like, Gutierrez needs to do more. And I was like, he probably should, but I think he's winning anyway. I don't know.
No one in the media, not one, gave it to Gutierrez. You're out in the cold on this one.
Fair enough.
I mean, I do see what you're saying. I thought this was, I was very excited by what Pedro Munoz was doing early. He looked quite aggressive. He was doing a lot of crowding, trying to take that. I mean, he also did like the Gaethje Barboza thing where he's like, oh, you're the leg kick guy? I'm going to leg kick you first and harder. Which I always think is that kind of dick measuring is often pretty useful in a fight. Like, you think this is your phase? Like, I am not only going to compete with you in it, I'm going to get there first and try to crush you. Try to put his stamp on one of Gutierrez's best sort of angles of attack. And had an easier time of it in that stage because he was the one pressing forward. And that is always the rule for kicking battles. The guy coming forward just has an easier time getting his kicks off. And then, yeah, he knocked Gutierrez down with some like weird shifting punch and got some time on the ground doing stuff I haven't seen Pedro Munoz do in a long time. And then it did become very much the same as I feel almost every Pedro Munoz fight for the last 5 years, including that Sean O'Malley one we talked about. It just kind of tapered off.
Yeah. just like, it's a kickboxing match, and it's not one I'm sure that you're winning.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was still winning. I thought the really big problem for Gutierrez is that he could not string anything together. And I thought Munoz did a fairly commendable job of keeping the pressure on even as his output drastically waned, because he was still the one standing his ground and moving forward and at least dominating the space of the fight. And kept delivering his low kicks. But it was at a much slower pace, and I felt that if Gutierrez had been able to actually come forward and put some combinations together, he probably very easily could have taken the lead. But he was not able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, this was... Even though I thought, the decision was... I mean, I was like 30-27?
Yeah.
It was strange to me. This was classic Gutierrez in the worst ways. Yeah. In a sort of, Arnold Allen at least, and he had to go for it. He went for it.
Yes.
There were still some of the old Arnold Allen issues going to the fore. This was like, okay, Chris Gutierrez, can you be you showed against like Frankie Edgar, you can be an assertive, damaging kickboxer. Can you do that here? And the answer was no. This was classic Chris Gutierrez in the worst way. Yeah. He's just a fighter who I think wants to be on top of everything,
and I think, in fact, the leg kicks that Munoz was so committed to, this was the best thing about Pedro's performance here, is that he remained committed to those low kicks. Unlike, say, Kelvin Gastelum, who we talked about last week, who had huge success with low kicks against Chris Curtis and then basically forgot about them through maybe 4 in the second and third rounds combined. Munoz stayed on those legs and kept switching up which leg he was attacking, kept switching up which stance he was kicking from, what combinations he was using to set them up, what feints he was using to set them up. And I think this was just information that Gutierrez couldn't allow himself to just come up with like an easy, good enough answer. Like, for example, taking the kick and just using that as an opportunity to throw 3 hard punches. He wanted to figure the kicks out. He wanted to stop getting hit by them. And so he spent a lot of time thinking defensively and trying to get Pedro's timing. And by the end, he was checking a lot of the kicks.
He checked a lot of them. I mean, both of them actually did, I thought, in general, just like a good job of checking the opponent's low kicks. I mean, for an MMA fight, it was like, I thought the kick defense was just generally pretty good.
Yeah.
I think much like the O'Malley fight, I think Pedro essentially gets to throw a lot of low kicks because he doesn't put very much behind them.
Yeah.
I don't know how much they were actually damaging either Gutierrez or O'Malley, but were working as just like a way of racking up points.
Yeah. He kept.
I suppose that's working for him now. I mean, I would have rather see him be the King's MMA Pedro Munoz.
Yeah.
Than this, but he gets to now 1-2 fights he wasn't particularly... I mean, he won this fight, he wasn't particularly favoured to win, I don't think, and then he's done, as we said, better against Sean O'Malley than Peter Yan did.
Yeah. I just think Gutierrez was too occupied with trying to have a clean fight, and even though this was not classically messy Pedro Munoz, you still can't go in there and expect to have a clean fight with him. Like, the guy who most thoroughly outboxed Pedro, other than Jose Aldo, I guess, was Aljamain Sterling. And that fight was scrappy and dirty. And he had to put himself in harm's way a lot to keep enough volume on Pedro that he could stay ahead and keep the initiative. Yeah, Gutierrez couldn't do it. Okay. Well, that'll be it for this week's edition of Heavy Hands. Make sure you head over to the Patreon. I don't know. I'm pressuring Phil right now into doing a bonus. Are we going to do a couple more Phil?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay, great. I've done it on the spot. You see how I've used emotional manipulation to get Phil to agree. So make sure you head over to the Patreon. We're going to talk about a few more of these undercard fights from the Holloway Allen card. Of course, next week, we will be back to recap whatever interesting may or may not have happened on the Pavlovich versus Blaydes card. There are a couple other fights on there that are like half interesting. There's Carol Osa versus Norma Dumont. Ronnie Yaya Montel Jackson is very weird and kind of interesting. I always like seeing Ronnie Yaya fight. Ricky Glenn, Christos Giagos is half of a good fight. And so is Bobby Green.
I think that is a good fight. It's just, just going to be violent and silly.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Bobby Green versus Jared Gordon is, to me, I like Jared Gordon, but I don't know. I mean, that's somewhat interesting. These are like mid-tier interesting fights. Hopefully, some of them pan out in a very interesting way, and we get to talk about them next week. One way or the other, the week after that, meaning we will be previewing on next week's show the new main event of the following Fight Night card, which is at bantamweight, and which is Song Yadong versus Ricky Simon. A fascinating fight, and at the moment, it looks like it has a half-decent undercard to back it up. So you can look forward to that for next week. And until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.